Okay, sure. So the way I would explain it to people is this: is there are a few factors that led to this situation. So one thing I learned courtesy of the guys over at Praxis, we've talked about them in numerous presentations. They're a alternative to college. It's like an apprenticeship program. One of the things Zachary Slayback, he's the former business director, taught me is that a lot of people have misconceptions of historically what school and higher education was. I think people have this idea that there was some golden era where you just went to school to become educated and then you went out to become productive in the world. And the thing is, for certain people that was true. Like, okay, if you were a doctor, you went to college. If you had money and you wanted to be a lawyer, you went to college. Academics, obviously, yeah. But colleges, aside from that, it was mostly, you know, it was for like they've compared them to sort of like summer camps for the rich where you had like finishing school and things like that.
Hmm.
Like someone posted recently how liberal arts was originally, oh, my son comes from a wealthy family and I want him to learn all these things because this is what a son from a wealthy family is supposed to know and how to be a proper gentleman. So I want him to learn history, study Latin, Greek, all that. So there's that. They were also religious institutions. The first one, University of Bologna, is in Italy. That's the longest running university. And yeah, and then the other category is just the people who had to go, like I say, doctors, lawyers, whoever. But it's like somehow this notion developed that if we push, well, what it is that you had all these successful entrepreneurs, like you can take Rockefeller, Carnegie, whoever, ultra successful, very little formal education. They once they became successful, they sent their kids to colleges for the reasons I mentioned. And then what ended up happening was people say, hey, we have all these wealthy people going to college. If we send our kids there, they'll be like those people. But again, that's putting the cart before the horse because it's these people were successful. I just wanted them to learn how to become gentlemen and ladies. I
Yeah.
don't know if I mentioned this before, but I'd forgotten there was a line in Titanic where Ruth, Rose's mother, says to her friends, the purpose of university is to find a suitable husband. Rose has already done that, but that was it. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, you're going to send your daughter to meet some handsome rich guy from a successful family, then they're going to get married, and then she's either going to stay at home, or if you're a guy, he's going to find a wife, or you're going to network with other rich people. All that. It's not like you went to Harvard, learned everything you could about business, and then became successful from that. That's not
Yeah.
what happened. Yeah.
It was more like your dad had a business, and then he needed you to take over the accounting, so he sent you to
Yeah.
college to get the accounting kind of knowledge that was in there. And that's a
Yeah.
system that can still be done today. Like this is one of just the new fixes that I think could be done with just school in the United States of America, even the same kind of system. This whole idea that you have to go straight out of college, straight out of high
Yeah.
school, doesn't really make sense. Why don't you
No.
just take some time off? This is something we've talked about several times before. Just you can even take out a loan for this. Take out a loan of like $2,000 or $3,000. Travel around America, just the states that you're living around. Do some part-time jobs here and there. Get to see how different people live in different areas. Even just go to like a college town and be like, okay, this is the actual college town that I probably want
Yeah.
to go to. I want to go to a school like this. Get a job at like a supermarket or something in the area. Just test out the area. Most schools you can actually just walk in on campus and sit in on classes and kind of see if it's something that you like. And then with that loan that you've taken for those $2,000, you also working so you can get like some pay, some you can pay back that loan right after you have it. It's already improving your credit score when you have to take out the
Mm.
final loan. Then you can get to that point. Like, why do you have to do it when you're 18, 19? Because
Yeah.
it's just not something that makes sense to me. And as you mentioned, I just don't understand how it switched from that. And looking here, found something here with the history of it. It said back in 1940, the graduates was only 1,860, well, no, 186,500.
Yeah.
Um, and that means less than 5% of the adults 25 or older in the U.S. had a college degree. This is back in 1940. Then
Sure.
by 1950, the number of college graduates nearly tripled, and that's still tripled. It's only 432,000. So what was the switch all of a sudden? When it's like 1970, you have it 839,000 already. And then, yeah, so the things just kind of just exponentially kept growing. But has America been so much more successful? This is something that people ask. Like, there's a lot of people in current year just damning the history. The few people in history, or the people in the past. Oh, these few people in the past had these backwards type of ideas, or they were negative, or they were
Oh,
this. But then, what have they personally done in their lives, or what has
yeah.
these generations actually achieved? Who are the people who are achieving much in these actual like it's it's an odd type of situation. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you bring up 1972 because that's a very important year. That's the second part of my point that was when there was a Supreme Court case called Griggs versus Duke Power. So for those who don't know, that was basically where it was ruled that IQ tests or similar things were considered discriminatory for employers to administer. Now, I think that's stupid because as you're probably thinking, well, the whole point is to discriminate. You're selecting for more or less intelligent people. Now, I don't think IQ is the be all end all. I think, it's been shown empirically that you're more likely to have a successful life the higher your IQ is and all that. I don't think you need to be a genius to be successful. I mean, there's plenty of people with average or slightly above who are. Um, but the problem, what happened here was because they were considered discriminatory, employers could no longer test to see if people were competent. So what's the solution? Well, let's send people to colleges, and then colleges will sort out, okay, who's less or more intelligent. But then what ended up happening was it became, well, okay, everyone has to go to college to prove that they're worth it. But then what ends up happening is all these people who in the past couldn't even get in, they couldn't handle it, so they had to lower the standards,
Mhm.
then get into things like affirmative action, legacy hires, all that, or legacy admissions, I mean. And then what ended up happening was you had to dumb down the curriculum to meet all these people who couldn't get in the past. And what ends up happening, more and more people have bachelor's degrees. That has less value. So then what? You need a master's. Okay, so then that has less value. You need a PhD, and on and on. And then add on top of this with the Fed creating all this easy money, especially from the 70s on after, the gold standard was ended. Add on the fact that colleges basically ran with it because they thought, well, if the government's going to push people into college, they're going to guarantee loans. Why don't we milk this as much as we can? And that's why college has gone through the roof. Like, I paid 32 a year for culinary school, which is like considered pricey for a culinary school. But like Pratt, the Art Institute in Brooklyn, that's 50 grand a year, and that's 4 or 5 years depending what you study. So it's gotten way out of sight. And like I have to believe people other than people like us sit here and think like we know it doesn't cost this much for people to learn. Like it's just like,
Yeah.
it's like this money isn't all it's not worth every penny. Like I said, my boomer relative said, yeah, but it's like you paid so much less and you got a job. So sure. But if it's like you're like Pratt, you're studying art. I mean, artists are notoriously poor, hence the expression starving artist. It's
Yeah.
like unless you either make it really big or you're able to support yourself by other means or something, it's like you're probably not going to become a millionaire producing art.
Yeah, and it's just another thing with the K through 12. This is another damning note against the K through 12 system. The more people have been through the K through 12 system, supposedly
Yeah.
the more they need postgraduate, the
Yeah.
more they need bachelors, the more they need masters, the more they need postgraduates in order to actually earn the same amount that people were making without even high school
Yeah.
degrees back in the day. Like, what is happening for your society for you to think this
Yeah.
is actually something that's actually working? Like, why do people still hold K through 12 in such a high system? You'd think if they've invested all that money in K through 12 already, that hey, these kids should be actually a lot better without college. But no, it's just been attached. And I think there's also part of that where people are just like, oh, I didn't have to apply for my K through 12, so why the hell should I have to really apply? Why should they all of a sudden be these higher standards for me to go to the
Yeah.
college? I should just us be able to go into it. That's why some people are like, oh, we should just also have free or tuition-free college. And that's not going to improve the situation. There's going to be tuition-free K through 12. Why do you think tuition-free post K through 12 is going to actually improve any kind of situation?
Yeah. And it's just the argument of the government's had you for 12 years already. If you can't produce anything after that, it's like, is it going to be a magical 4 years where you become super valuable? Like,
Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.